Welcome to Clinicians Corner. Here, Molly and I will provide you with evidence-based insights and practical tools for addressing ultra-processed food addiction. This segment is designed for both individuals navigating recovery and professionals supporting clients through the treatment process. We will be bridging personal experience with clinical expertise to enhance understanding about the treatment of food addiction and the many pathways to recovery.
Each episode explores key topics such as the neurobiology of addiction, strategies for sustainable recovery, behavioral interventions, and the impact of diet trauma. We'll also discuss practical approaches for fostering self-compassion, managing setbacks, and building individualized, empowering eating practices.
Whether you are in recovery or a clinician working with clients, Clinicians Corner offers research-informed perspectives, real-world applications, and therapeutic tools to support long-term healing.
Join us the first Friday of each month for thoughtful conversations that equip you with the knowledge and strategies needed for meaningful progress in ultra-processed food addiction recovery.
Expert insights,
practical tools,
transforming recovery one conversation at a time. Hello, Molly. Nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you too.
So today we're going to talk about something that kind of lives right at the edge of good intentions and unintended harm. So in the field of food addiction, eating disorder, and substance use, diagnosis can absolutely be helpful. It can bring relief, it can bring language, it can bring access to care, and even a sense that we're not alone. But there is another side to the story. Many people in recovery describe something kind of quieter, maybe harder to name. They may say, I don't feel seen anymore, or I feel managed. And today we're going to explore what happens when clinicians and coaches or even treatment systems stop listening and start interpreting everything through the lens of pathology. And we're going to talk a bit about ego, and we're going to talk about the importance of self-determination. And we'll talk about what recovery looks like when diagnosis becomes more of a starting point rather than like a destination. And the reason that Molly and I started talking about this is she sent me an article. And it was, after reading it, I was like, this is what we need to do Clinicians Corner on. So Molly, can you share a bit about what this article was?
Yeah. So back in like the 70s, 80s, back then, there was a psychiatrist who was noticing that people were maybe being misdiagnosed or missed entirely, whatever it might be. And what he did is he himself and 8 or 9 others, some women, mostly men, were admitted to psychiatric hospitals across the US. And it ranged from underfunded hospitals in rural areas to urban run hospitals with really great reputations, all the way to expensive private hospitals. And they all identified the same symptoms, right? They all went in saying, this is what I'm experiencing. 7 of them were diagnosed. I think there were 9 total, right? Including the psychiatrist. So 7 of them were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And they didn't actually have schizophrenia, right? So their stays ranged anywhere from 7 to 52 days, with an average of 19 days. All but one were discharged. All but one were discharged with a diagnosis of schizophrenia in remission.
And none of them had schizophrenia.
None of them had yeah. And so what came of that is that this gentleman who was running this kind of experiment said, basically perceived or said that this evidence is perceived, that mental illness is perceived as an irreversible condition, that's lifelong, it's incurable, all of these things, he was saying this has to do with somebody's, the clinician, whoever was in front of him, it was getting filtered through their ego, their lens, their experiences, but they weren't actually paying attention to what was happening. So the real kind of kicker, the asterisk to this is, so they go in saying, these are my symptoms. They all get this diagnosis, and then they get put in general population, where then they were told by the experimenter, right, to behave normally. And the more normally they behaved, the more that the psychiatrist in charge of the hospital or like the staff members actually noted that it was like increasing mental illness symptoms. Right. So instead,
the denial.
Right. So instead of like paying attention to this, going like, well, this is strange. Like, this person came in, we've diagnosed schizophrenia, but really they're behaving quite like, you know, like
they said their symptoms were no longer existing.
Right. Yeah. And instead of believing them, they were like, well, actually, you're just really sick. And this, you know, there's a term for it. I mean, whether we care about the terms or not, but it's called epistemic dismissal, right? So it's like, it goes beyond that, like, invalidation piece. I know we've talked about invalidation before on food shrinks and maybe even a little bit here, definitely in groups, that kind of thing. But it's like that active or even passive rejection, devaluation, ignoring of knowledge, testimony, expertise of others, right? And it stems from our own prejudices against these often marginalized groups, because let's face it, like, people with severe mental illness are a marginalized group, right? And it really undermines a person's status as a credible, like, knower or expert in their own life.
Of their own experience, right? And I think that was the crux of what we wanted to talk about, because you know, we work with a very vulnerable population, and we know there are clinicians out there that are not listening to what the person in front of them is saying. And so we wanted to talk about some of the dangers of that today. And again, we want you to know that diagnosis is not the villain here, right? It exists for a reason. It does give us shared language. It allows research. It opens doors for treatment, even insurance. It's kind of, I like to think of it as this flashlight, right? It helps us see patterns that were previously confusing. But the problem is the flashlight can become kind of this floodlight when the person that's standing in front of us gets lost in the glare, right? So I think of diagnosis kind of as a map. It can guide us, but if we forget to stop looking at the map and we're not looking at like the actual terrain, it can totally lead us off course.
Yeah. And you know, what's so interesting about this is I actually very recently had a real world example with a client who had this experience where she, you know, has been on and off antidepressants over the years. She's been, you know, she's played around with like hormone kind of stuff over the years. You know, different symptoms have come up, that kind of thing. But then she'll spend years not doing anything because she's like, this is a mess. And I'm just going to like let my system, you know, stabilize without any like external influence, like from pharmaceuticals, whatever it might be. Well, so she decided not that long ago, I'd say this has been a year ago now, she decided, listen, it's getting to that point again. I need some extra support. I'm going to go see a psychiatrist. And I'm like, of course, go do that. Please go do that. And this psychiatrist, without even psychiatric nurse practitioner, like without reaching out to me, the person who has seen this person for over a decade, without reaching out to me, sees this person for, you know, an hour and a half intake, whatever it might be, and diagnoses, literally gives her a diagnosis of ADHD. And I'm like, that has never been on my radar with this person whatsoever. Somebody who I have spent hours with at this point, right? Like, and I have a best friend business partner.
Yeah.
I've spent my life around people with ADHD, my daughter. Like, I am surrounded by people. And granted, now me saying this, I also have to be aware of my own bias, right? Like, I can't filter it through, oh, she doesn't check the same boxes that these other people check. But I'm well aware that everybody kind of has their own flavor to it. But like, none of these flags have ever gone off for me, right? So she gets diagnosed, they put her on medication, and sends her literally to the ER with a panic attack that she has never experienced before in her life, right? And so it's just like this really great example of when we are only, as to the clinicians, to the practitioners, to the quote professionals who are listening to this episode, we have to be so careful that we can't just like listen to these things and I have a hammer and now everything is a nail, because we are doing that disservice. And to your point, it can also be very helpful so that we can start to find the right avenue of treatment, any sort of intervention. Also, so we don't feel alone. Like when there's a label for it, it's like, oh, other people have experienced this. That's why there's a label.
That
So
can be
I know
really helpful. But it doesn't mean that at one point I might fit that label. And then after a little bit of treatment, I don't fit that label anymore. And we can't become that label. And the label is a guide, like I said, but it's not always the destination. And so when, as clinicians, we stop listening and we just only focus on interpreting, that's when I think of a situation where maybe a client comes in and they're like, oh, I'm scared I'm becoming too rigid. Maybe they've completed the Y-FAST. Maybe they've completed the FASI. Maybe they've even done a sugar tool. And all these things say they're severe. And I'm doing quotes here. And then this client shows up and says, I'm scared I'm being too rigid. And now the clinician who has these tools says, oh, that's your disorder talking. Instead of tell me more about what that means to you. Because, all the client is learning now is their inner experience is not trustworthy. And therapeutically, that changes everything for that person. Because now clients are performing recovery instead of living it. They say what they think the clinician wants to hear, and their honesty shrinks and their curiosity disappears. Like in preparation, thinking about this episode, nobody ever once asked me what my goals were around substance use.
Yeah.
Never once.
Yeah.
And I was in treatment for so many years. My goals were what the therapist wanted, what the treatment center decided, what my parents wanted, even like what my sister told me was the right thing. Not one person in my life ever asked me at any point what I wanted, because this was addiction and everybody must know better than me.
Right. But I think about when we have clients or even ourselves individually, when people go to the doctor and they are about to embark on, say, cancer treatment or, whatever, they get asked, what do you want?
Like to do chemo? Do
you want to try alternative? Like the clinician does not have to agree with, understand, whatever. Like you don't have to explain yourself to me, but it is my job to make sure you have all of the options laid out in front of you and that that you can pick and choose as you go. And so to your point about like nobody ever asking you, it's really interesting when we do ask clients, like, what are your best hopes? What do you want? What does that look like? And it's met with,
what do you
shock
think?
And horror.
My goal should be.
What do you want? What do you want? Shock and horror, deer in the headlights, anger.
Yeah.
People get mad.
Why do you think I'm here? For you to help me and tell me what I need to be doing, right? When it's like, no, I'm just actually curious. Like, I don't even know what my answer would have been if somebody said, like, so are you looking to do like moderation, harm reduction, or abstinence? I would have been like, this is unbelievable. Like, is this person trying to harm me? Is probably what I would have thought at the time, right?
Well, and I think that there are people out, like professionals out there, who would say that is hurting you.
I know, that's why we're talking about it.
No, absolutely. I just want to like,
this is the ego, right? Ego doesn't always look like arrogance. Often it looks like certainty. This is the only way people get better. Ego is, I know what's best for you, follow my plan, and you'll be okay. If you don't agree, you're being resistant.
Yes, which is so frustrating when you as a clinician, professional, whatever role you're in, like there's a power differential. And when you over-identify with that model, right? When you've decided this is the only way, you are going to inadvertently, most likely, I don't think that people are out there necessarily doing this on purpose.
Intentionally harming. I agree.
Right. It happens where it's like all of a sudden now I'm like disregarding information that doesn't fit my model. And I'm only paying attention, maybe even hyper focusing on the information that does fit my model. And I'm going to use that to justify why this is the intervention I have decided on, or the line of questioning, or the instruction that I'm giving.
Yeah. And I think as clinicians, it's really important that we name what's going on here, which is also fear. right? I think it serves to protect us to have a one-way model because then we don't fear we're getting it wrong. We don't fear client harm. We don't fear the uncertainty. And in addiction and eating disorder work, sometimes the urgency is high. So clinicians want safety as much as clients want safety. And maybe clinicians feel that safety can only come if they see certain improvements, right? And so that's how they protect themselves. But that's when ego has now gone, the relationship has gone from partnership to authority. That's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even like choosing the model over the relationship. Because, you and I have had this conversation before, and I've been saying this for decades. It doesn't actually matter what model we show up with, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, solution focused, DBT. It doesn't freaking matter. We have known for years that one of the main factors in people making improvements, their recorded improvements, not necessarily mine, right? Like nobody has to do anything for me, is the relationship, the therapeutic relationship.
Rapport. Right. And I think, as a clinician, if we are just reducing clients to a category, we are doing a huge disservice because people are not just coming into treatment with symptoms. They're coming in with their own identity, their own history, their own culture, their own neurobiology, trauma, value, hopes, all of these things in one package. So a screening, an assessment, and a diagnostic form doesn't capture any of that. And so when everything, is filled through that lens, that's when they become the binge eater. That's when they become the addict. That's when they become the relapser. And then they start repeating that language because the client is taking on that identity.
Of course. And I'm like, how about I'm just Molly? Like, how about you're just Clarissa? Like, how about not any one individual of those things actually makes up who you are whatsoever? They're words that describe behavior. They're words that describe symptoms. That often are rooted in childhood experiences, trauma, like if we want to get into all of that, right? But in doing that, like you said, like to then take on that identity, how does that not erode somebody's self-trust?
Absolutely. And I think we do need to tackle what we were talking about a little bit because it's a real question. Can somebody meet criteria for substance use disorder and still feel curious about moderation or occasional use?
In my book, yes, because that's like the model that I work from is like, there's room for all. And I also am curious, and moderation management does fall into or does align with my ethical standards of harm reduction. Now, moderation management is obviously different than like pure harm reduction, right? It's a factor that some people do like to work within. But yeah, I mean, for me, yes, I would say yes.
No, and I agree, right? Ambivalence is not pathology. Ambivalence is so human. And if the person you're working with is curious about moderation, when it comes to food addiction or food addiction treatment, there is very little harm in letting them determine for themselves if that's actually going to work for them.
Right. Yeah. That's just it is I don't understand. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around not letting somebody have a say in their life and allowing them room to experiment with support. I just don't get how we would want to take away somebody's self-determination and their dignity. And like, because all that's going to happen is, to your point, what you were saying earlier is now they're just going to show up and they're going to present correctly. Again, like heavy quotations.
And they're doing their own thing in the background.
And so now we really can't help because we don't know now it's just like hiding in secret again, right? Like being behind closed doors, whatever it might be. And that's not helpful. So basically then they're paying you to show up and tell you what you want to hear. So now the session's all about you and for you. That's gross. That's gross. I didn't get into this profession for me. Like not at all.
And I think that it's not that like, and this is probably going to be the hard part to hear, is this doesn't mean we are abandoning clinical wisdom. It means we are collaborating with the person in front of us instead of imposing my rules for quote unquote sobriety on someone else. And, sometimes The most amazing thing I've seen in my clinical practice is when you allow people to experiment and get curious, they figure out for themselves what actually works for them and what doesn't. And if they are curious about moderation and they don't experiment, there's always going to be a part of them that's going to wonder. And if we don't explore that part of them with them, then we are doing a disservice to them.
Absolutely. And when we put a lot of fear around it, like, oh, that's your disease, that's your whatever, like there's fear put on it. Like, oh, if you experiment with moderation, you're just keeping yourself sick longer and all of these things. Okay. So whoever is saying that thing, that might be their truth and their limitation and their like needs, whatever. But that isn't necessarily true for the person who's receiving it. And that right now we've opened them up to, again, like that whole, like it feels like gaslighting is what it feels like.
Yes, that's it. And that's because I would say the clinician's goals and the client's goals don't match, right? The clinician goals are like abstinence, symptom elimination, total rapid change in their life, right? Where the client's goal is going to be like relief, stability, maybe exploration, maybe just less chaos. We have to figure out what their best hopes are, not what our goals are for them.
100%. And this is where I always talk about, like, I rather go low and slow. Like, I want to come in with the least amount of intervention necessary. And that might sound like, to your point, like that might sound counterintuitive to anybody who is listening to this. But here's the deal. If I meet them in the with the lowest or the smallest amount of intervention and go very slow, it gives time for us to make some of these shifts, because we all know behavior change takes a really long time. It takes a really long time. I just want to name that so that everybody is so aware there's no shame in the game of it taking a really long time, of you like having to like wash, rinse, repeat, do the same thing over and over again while you're learning. Like, listen, think about when you were a baby and you were learning to walk or feed yourself or talk or read. Any of those things, they take time and they take repetition. They take making a choice and realizing that choice works for me or doesn't work for me.
Right. And you need a clinician that's going to be there through all of it, right? Not when like, okay, well, we talked about this like a few weeks ago. Why aren't you implementing some of these things? Because everybody has a really good reason for everything they do. And if you don't believe that as a clinician, that can be problematic. I think when your goals and the client's goals don't meet, I always think of it as like two people rowing a boat in opposite directions. And you're just like spinning around and nothing is happening. And you're in the middle of a lake, right? It's not helpful.
No, not at all. And I think too, you know, like what that tells me is, if I'm so like, our listeners may not know this, but we have supervision, right? So we have coaches who work for us, and every month they get like 5 hours of supervision, 2.5 hours every other week. And what that tells me, because I work with, and this isn't the first time I've done supervision but right, is that when we get into that space that you were just describing, right, it's that we have a growth edge that needs to be explored. That's where it shows up like, oh, that's my work as a clinician. How can I be better? Right? We can start to have curiosity around our own stuff. This isn't like, oh, to call people out and be like, shame on you and all of that. No, this is about getting curious. Like, how can we expand our curiosity and be better for the people that we work with?
Yes, I love that. And I think that's so important. And I can't, like, there's been, and for me, a big sign when it's like, oh, I need to check in with Molly and like tell her all about this and do like a case consult, is if I'm noticing any kind of frustration with a client. And because that's never about the client. That's always about me. And so, but sometimes I can't see what it is. And so it's helpful to go into supervision and discuss these things so that I can see my blind spots, because like I can see them very easily for other people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to see my own stuff.
Right. And so then being able to get curious about that and to, right, using your example, then I might get curious around like, oh, maybe there are big feelings that this client is having that you haven't maybe learned to work out for yourself, or maybe they're doing something that brings up big feelings in you and your self-preservation says, squash that, tell them they're doing it wrong, redirect them in a way that feels safer for you, whatever it might be. But again, we can't do that if we're not having consultations with each other as other professionals or going to some kind of supervision group, whatever it might be, where we can start to look at some of these things so that we can, again, be helpful. And I've said this before, and I will say it until I no longer have to say it. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I would rather people get the help that they need and not need somebody like me. I would rather not have this job, actually, not because I don't love what I do and not because I don't love working with my clients, whatever, but because it would mean that we have taught a whole generation of people how to be able to do some of this work for themselves without needing somebody, right? Trusting themselves. Exactly. Without needing.
Yes. And I think that's an important gateway into talking about why self-determination matters, right? And I think there's this misconcept about self-determination means people can do whatever they want. And that's not what it is. It's really about ownership, right? When somebody chooses, these are my goals, immediately their motivation deepens. Their sense of agency starts to return, and recovery becomes about something I get to create now, not something that's being done to me. And that's from me speaking of personal experience. I had no idea what my recovery was supposed to be. I was just always trying to do whatever anybody else's definition was of recovery and get it right. And the research consistently shows that autonomy is what actually predicts engagement, persistence, and long-term change. That is important. So we cannot outsource a person's inner authority.
No, I agree. And I think that's like the rebel in me gets it gets all worked up for you too, but it certainly gets worked up for me because I think about, there's this belief, we're in recovery forever. We're in recovery forever. But that's actually not what the definition of recovery is, right? Like the word recovery, if we go look at the definition of recovery, it's about getting back what was once lost. Okay. So once we get back to and this is my perception. This is how I view my life, not for anybody else. But I think about this, once I got to this point of stabilization, and this would have been decades ago already, right? When I stopped being in that suicidal place into a more stable place, I would say at that point I had recovered what had been lost because I wasn't always suicidal, but there was a period of time. And then since then, my life, I have lived through a lens of discovery. Because I cannot live in this place of over and over again being well, you're sick, Molly. Well, you're this. Well, you're that. You got to go do I can't live in that place. It feels too prescriptive. It feels too small. And I've said it to you before too. I'm I'm a mother loving ocean. I am all kinds of things. I am deep. I am wide. I am angry and I am, soft and smooth. I've got all of these things. And this one word recovery, it doesn't do enough for me, but discovery opens me up to be curious and to say, listen, I've noticed that I've been doing this thing and it doesn't really work for me anymore. I'm going to try something else. And as I'm trying that other thing, I've started to notice, then other things are it doesn't really fit anymore because I've put this boundary here or I've changed my morning routine or whatever it might be. And so now all of a sudden my life is getting bigger, where recovery just restored it to where maybe it had been or stabilized.
Yeah. Yes. I actually love that definition.
Yeah. And I think when we can look at it through that lens, it's easier to believe as the clinician, the professional, whomever, right? It's easier almost to go to that place of self-determination. Yeah, this person's just living their life for the first time too. Same as me.
Right. Everything's new. Yeah. And anything at this point can be possible.
Yes. And how many of us never learned to play, right? How many of us never learned to play? And this was always one of my issues, as I never learned how to play. So when my therapist would be well, what do you like to do in your free time? Well, what are your hobbies? Well, it was the worst. It was the worst. It was the worst question ever because then I felt like I was failing all over again. Here comes the shame. I don't know. I don't like things. I don't know how to be playful, any of those things. But as time has allowed this idea of this is about discovery, I've gotten to figure out how I like to play or how I like to be creative or whatever. And if somebody would have told me 20 years ago how to do that, I would have left and not gone back. And I don't know where I would be today.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the one thing that's still also from the compassionate lens and the trauma informed lens, which I think we talk a lot about, to mention is that behaviors that look like symptoms are sometimes also solutions, right? So control, being really controlling, can be safety after chaos. If we think about restriction, that can be protection after trauma. And when we talk to people with ADHD or neurodiversity, reward seeking can be nervous system regulation in neurodivergent brains and work really well.
Yes.
And, we really sometimes, if we don't have the full context, then we are treating smoke instead of fire.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you like reframed it that way because we do not need to pathologize everything. Like
Right.
everything does not need to be a symptom of something wrong.
Yes.
It could actually be an indication that things are going well, or we've like come to like I often use like analogies because I'm such a visual person, but I think about it like swimming, right? So like we're swimming. Sometimes we just have to tread water. And so some of those things that we've used in the past, may have been harmful, are actually like treading water or like a floating dock in the middle of the lake where I just get to rest.
Right now.
Yes. Like my brain, my body, everything already knows how to do this. And while it can look like a step backwards, and if somebody's calling it a step backwards, now the client's probably like, oh,
they're definitely
right. Yeah, no,
let go. I'm just going to let go and drown then. That'll be fine, right?
Right. Yes. So we could just be like, you're okay. Like, yeah, we're just treading water right now. Wait until you feel like stable again, until you feel regulated again, and we'll start moving. And in the meantime, whoever the professional is working with this client, right, we can start to say things like, or get curious and be like, help me understand more. Tell me about what this is like day to day. Like, paint me that picture. Because in having that conversation, sometimes we can help people move out of that state a little bit sooner because we're showing up with curiosity rather than being like, oh my gosh, this is really bad.
Question. Or like the belief that we have the authority and knowledge that we don't have over this person. When you get curious, like, what is this? What problem is this behavior trying to solve? But I think probably the biggest challenge for clinicians is working from that place of not knowing.
Yes, I love that place.
I know
a lot of people don't.
You ask the best questions. And but what lets anyone believe that they know everything about the person that's sitting in front of them?
Yeah. Ego, to use your word again. It's ego.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying it necessarily to call people out, but to bring awareness that we all, as clinicians, we are in the room with the person or on the Zoom with the person, right? We are still there. We are still human beings, and we have to figure out how to check our ego at the door because these sessions are not for us or about us ever.
And I think people just clinicians equate not knowing with abandoning their expertise, right? But I think we can certainly have thoughts and experience that can help and know that the person that is sitting in front of us is the expert on themselves.
Yes, exactly. And it's so funny because when I work with clients, that's exactly how I set it up. I say, you're the expert in you. My job is to be the expert in like behavior change, however I frame it. I said, and asking really good questions. Like, that's it. I am not the expert in you. So whatever information you give me, that's what I'm working with. So if you leave information out, I don't have that information to work with. And that's okay. You don't have to ever give me any information you don't want to give me, but that's where then sometimes being able to be curious while keeping our expertise of whatever it is we're an expert in, whether you're a medical doctor or a therapist, whatever, means that now you can ask really good questions because you have an understanding of the potential thing, but also they're the expert in them. So if they're saying, hey, that's not my lived experience, it actually looks this other way, believe them, please. Just leave. I mean, please, pretty please with a cherry on top, please.
Yeah, I think to close, right? I think that this episode is for clinicians and clients and us learning how to stay in the space together. I think if you are a clinician, you need to really ask yourself whose anxiety is driving this plan. Is it mine or is it theirs? And for clients, I think you need to really be asking yourself, like, do I feel more empowered or smaller after session?
Right. Yeah. Because this is my final thing, right? This is just like I would say to a parent and a child, and I don't care how old the child is. They're still your child. The same thing as the professional to the client. It is not the client's job to communicate to you better or like talk you into like, it is not the client's job to be self-aware enough to like fix this. This is you, the clinician. This is on you to be better at being a clinician. And I say that with all the love in my heart because I am always being humbled and
I'm always learning.
I'm always learning and it doesn't feel good. It sucks, right? There are times, I mean, like you said, like we debrief and sometimes I'm like bawling, like it happens, right? Because we're humans. We don't know everything, but I do not want to put the onus on the client listener right now saying, oh, this is on you to like go fix this and make this right. It's not. Now, if you come away from this episode feeling more empowered and that you can communicate your needs, your wants, your desires better, more, whatever, louder, however, great. And I support you in that. And if you ever want help with that, let me know because scripts are like my favorite thing. Trying those things that like, that's my favorite thing. I love it so much, helping you find your authentic voice, that kind of thing. But I'm with you. Like, this is about being with the people that we're working with, like literally just being with them and not being at this like opposition place. Yeah.
It's all about the collaboration.
It is. It's all about the collaboration. Probably less burnout that way too, folks. Just a little hint.
Yeah. Like, I leave a session and I'm like, whoa, I was working so hard. I'm like, oh, I better call Molly or I need to check in. Something was off there because that's not what it's about, right? It's just like we are a safe container and we just hold space for the people that we work with and let them share what's going on for them. And what a gift to be invited to be a witness into somebody's inner world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're a person who has ever gone to the doctor, a therapist, whomever, and your lived experience has been dismissed, I just want to say, I am you too. I see you. I feel you in that. And I really hope that those experiences do not stop you from pushing forward with whatever you
finding someone who can listen because those people aren't there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And just not to give up on yourself, if you can keep going, if you can find somebody who is willing to be with you. Yeah, totally. So that's it from me now. I'll zip it, lock it, put it in my pocket.
And if you have a topic you would like to talk to us about, it is, what's the email?
The email is foodjunkiespodcast@gmail.com.
And we're on YouTube. So if you are enjoying our conversation and you're tired of me saying air quotes and you want to watch me do them instead, check us out there, subscribe. We really want to grow our YouTube channel so we can continue to provide you with more material and have greater reach. And we just are so grateful for all of you listening for 5 years plus now. Amazing.
Woo-hoo! Yay. See y'all next time.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.